Welcome back, everyone. The world is living through a moment few experts thought possible just a short time ago. A confrontation that was once theoretical, involving diplomatic posturing and proxy actions, has now taken on a palpable, dangerous edge. Iran's repeated warnings that it would respond fiercely to any attack by the United States or Israel have grabbed global attention. Iranian leaders have said they will treat any attack, no matter how limited, as an all-out war, effectively promising that the price of aggression would be extraordinarily high. Reuters, in the midst of a brutal domestic crackdown on widespread protests, Iran has also used provocative public symbolism as it positions itself against what it perceives as foreign interference. A massive mural in Tehran's Engelab Square now depicts a devastated U.S. aircraft carrier with a message warning against aggression, reflecting a sentiment shared by hardliners that foreign intervention would be met with devastating consequences. AP News: these statements aren't happening in a vacuum. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has openly declared its forces are more ready than ever, with a finger on the trigger, indicating that military readiness has reached a new height. Tehran's warning that attackers will face intense retaliation, imagery sometimes paraphrased as "welcome to hell." In media reporting underscores how serious Iran's military leadership feels about deterring foreign intervention. AP News: at the same time, the United States has been sending significant military assets, including an aircraft carrier strike group, toward the Middle East as a demonstration of force. President Trump and senior U.S. officials have issued strong warnings to Tehran that certain actions, such as rebuilding parts of its nuclear program or carrying out violent repression of protesters, could prompt American intervention. ABC News +1 from Tehran's perspective. This buildup is perceived not as defense, but as a threat to Iranian sovereignty. A senior Iranian official stated that any attack, regardless of size, would be considered all-out war against Iran. That's a stark escalation from conventional deterrence rhetoric used in past crises. Reuters: the backdrop to these warnings includes months of internal turbulence within Iran. Thousands of Iranians have taken to the streets to protest economic hardship, political repression, and the government's handling of national crises. Reports indicate that during these protests, particularly in cities like Rasht, security forces used lethal force against civilians, with dozens, possibly hundreds, killed in confrontations. The Washington Post: the unrest inside Iran has been one of the deadliest periods since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, with reports from some human rights agencies claiming thousands have been killed and tens of thousands arrested. While the Iranian government disputes some of those figures, the scale of violence is widely reported and signals deep societal frustration. AP News: these domestic pressures have an international dimension. Iran's leadership routinely frames external threats as a way to rally nationalistic sentiment and justify harsh internal measures. But it also underscores how internal instability can make Tehran more assertive in foreign policy as a means to shift focus outward. The intertwining of domestic repression with aggressive foreign rhetoric creates a volatile combination. AP News: simultaneously, Houthi, rebels in Yemen who are backed by Iran, have threatened to renew attacks on shipping in the Red Sea as tensions rise. The positioning of the USS Abraham Lincoln and other warships near the region further fuels fears of broader conflict that could drag in multiple fronts beyond the immediate Iranian, American, and Israeli relationship. AP News: to understand today's tensions, it's necessary to look at the recent history of direct conflict and military engagement. Just last year, a brief but intense conflict erupted between Iran and Israel. In June 2025, Israel launched extensive airstrikes on Iranian soil, targeting nuclear sites and other strategic locations. The attacks caused significant damage and loss of life, and Iran retaliated with missile barrages toward Israel's major cities. Gulf news that war lasted about 12 days before a ceasefire was negotiated by Qatar and the United States. Although it ended active hostilities, the underlying issues remained unresolved. Iran's nuclear ambitions, Israel's insistence on preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, and the United States' strategic support of Israel during the conflict have left deep wounds and unresolved grievances. Wikipedia both sides claimed victories at the ceasefire, but the reality was far more complex. Iran's infrastructure was damaged, and its nuclear program setbacks were significant. Conversely, Iran's missile attacks demonstrated a willingness to strike deep into Israeli territory, challenging the assumption that Tehran could be deterred by conventional means. Wikipedia, the casualty figures from the Iran-Israel war, also reveal the human cost of such conflicts. Reports indicate that both military personnel and civilians were killed on both sides. Estimates vary, but thousands were wounded or killed over the course of the hostilities, underscoring how quickly such confrontations can escalate into heavy loss of life. Wikipedia, in the months following the war, diplomacy has been uneven and fraught with tension. Negotiations between Iran and the United States, aimed at limiting the nuclear program, collapsed amid mistrust and renewed military threats. At one point, talks scheduled in Oman were indefinitely suspended after Israeli strikes, and subsequent Iranian retaliation undermined diplomatic confidence. Wikipedia, even after the ceasefire, Iranian leadership has insisted that the United States and Israel crossed a big red line with their attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities. Tehran has repeatedly made clear that diplomacy has limited value unless it respects Iran's core security concerns, a stance that has hardened positions on both sides. Arab News: The United States, for its part, maintains that its actions are intended to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, which Washington and its allies view as an unacceptable threat to regional and global security. U.S. officials have argued that military pressure is necessary to slow down or halt Tehran's progress in sensitive nuclear enrichment capabilities. Gulf News: Israel's role in this conflict cannot be overstated. Jerusalem sees Iran as its greatest existential threat, particularly if Tehran were to acquire a deliverable nuclear weapon. This threat perception has driven Israel to conduct preemptive strikes, covert operations, and high-intensity military actions aimed at degrading Iran's nuclear infrastructure. But each action has also deepened Iranian resolve to resist and retaliate. Gulf News: The polarization of these positions has led to a cycle of retaliation, mistrust, and escalating rhetoric. Iran's repeated warnings of devastating retaliation, often couched in apocalyptic language, reflect both a strategic deterrence posture and internal ideological framing. Leaders in Tehran want to project strength domestically and regionally, while warning adversaries that aggression will not go unanswered. AP News: At the same time, the United States and Israel see aggressive pushback as necessary to prevent a nuclear Iran and to counter Tehran's influence across the Middle East. This includes Iran's support for proxy groups across the region, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen, which further complicates the strategic environment. Council on Foreign Relations' international reactions to these developments have been mixed. Some global powers, including Russia and China, have criticized U.S. military actions, framing them as violations of international law and destabilizing to the region. Others have called for de-escalation and a return to diplomatic negotiations. Arab News, the United Nations, has repeatedly voiced concern about the risk of a broader conflict and the humanitarian toll on civilians. UN officials have warned that any escalation could trigger cycles of retaliation that stretch beyond the immediate actors, affecting global peace and security. Gulf News' economic implications also loom large. Oil markets reacted nervously to reports of military escalation, with prices fluctuating amid fears of disruption in Middle Eastern supply routes. Global stock markets have also shown sensitivity to the instability, reflecting investor concerns about broader global economic impacts. Despite the grim outlook, there are still voices calling for restraint and diplomacy. Some Iranian civil society leaders and international peace advocates have urged a halt to nuclear enrichment and a push toward peaceful resolution. Others stress that neither direct conflict nor long-term strategic paralysis serves the interests of the people in the region. Yet, the entrenched positions on all sides make diplomatic breakthroughs challenging. Iran's leadership appears convinced that strength and deterrence are the best defense, while the United States and Israel maintain that aggressive strategic pressure is the only way to prevent future nuclear escalation. This strategic impasse perpetuates a climate where mistrust and military posturing reinforce one another. Council on Foreign Relations for ordinary citizens across the region. The human cost is already profound. Millions have lived with the constant threat of missile strikes, economic instability, and displacement. Civilians in Israel, Iran, and neighboring countries have experienced disruptions to daily life, infrastructure damage, and the psychological toll of living under threat. Gulf News, the phrase "welcome to hell," captures more than just a stark warning. It encapsulates a moment in which the world is reminded of how fragile peace can be and how quickly strategic rivalries can turn into violent confrontation. Whether this rhetoric translates into large-scale war or remains part of a tense standoff depends on actions taken or avoided by leaders in Tehran, Washington, and Jerusalem. The stakes could not be higher. A misstep, miscommunication, or miscalculation could expand a regional conflict into a broader conflagration, drawing in global powers and affecting not just the Middle East, but the entire international community. At this perilous moment, military posturing walks a fine line with diplomacy, and the decisions made now will echo for years to come. This is not simply a regional issue, it is a global one. And as the world watches, one question looms large: will the warning of welcome to hell become reality, or will cooler heads and diplomatic channels diffuse one of the most dangerous flashpoints of the 21st century?